looking at is a giant chunk of walnut that I've had for a little while now. When Double H Boots asked me to come up with a guitar stool, a place for someone to play guitar in their showroom, they wanted a nice, interesting stool, and I thought, let me sculpt one out of this piece of material. I'm not gonna lie, I'm very intimidated by this giant chunk of wood. It's like looking at a blank piece of paper in a journal. You just don't know where to begin. I have a vague idea after thinking it and mulling it over. We have these big tapered legs that are going to get cut out of here. These chunks of wood give me a lot of room to sculpt, but then I'm also going to go into it with Arbortech tools and some sanding and grinding. And hopefully we come up with a nice fluid, Maloof-inspired stool. And we'll see where it goes. You'll be on the ride with me. Thank you. Thank you, Double H Boots. The process starts right here. This is a chainsaw attachment that was available in the closeout section at Harbor Freight. I dedicated one of my DeWalt saws to it. And now here I am. That's a 30-inch piece that I cut off of that 8-foot piece. This is 5 inches thick by 15 inches. And what you see me doing here is cutting up these tapered legs. They go from 2 inches at one end to 4 inches over 30 inches. And I'm going to have to cut a taper in 2 directions. This is my 1925 American Woodworking Tools bandsaw. I have a 1-inch thick blade with 4 teeth per inch. And it happens to be a brand new blade, so it's cutting, it's not bouncing, it's not wobbling. This is the first time I'm using it. But it's the perfect project for the first time cut. Something so thick, I want to make sure that the cuts are straight and clean. And this is going to be sculpted. There's a lot of sculpting going on here. Freestyling. I really just had to let go of everything that I was worried about and just get started. Sometimes you just gotta jump in, and now you can see it's 2 by 2 at one end, 4 by 4 at the other. This is a slice of the leg. I did a little sketch on it, which shows where the joints are going to start happening, and the joints are going to be out here while the biomorphic shape starts to find its way back inside. So this is a template. Every one of the legs I just cut on the giant bandsaw are going to be cut on the 2 sides with this pattern. So let me just cut the pattern here, and then I could use this to draw it so everything is fairly consistent. Now I drew those shapes on it with those radius curves on the small bandsaw, and I thought I was going to cut these on the small bandsaw. That's why I put the radius curve on it, but it's just too thick for the small bandsaw, so I hack at those corners. I'm going to hack at them later on with the Arbortech, so I'm not overly worried about them. So I'm just really roughing it out. I'm leaving a lot to the sculpting section of this build. And now, considering that I'm going to do cross members, I'm not sure what they would be called. I'm not a fine furniture maker per se, so I'm not sure what to call the rungs that would go across for each one of the legs. So each one of these bump outs on these legs are going to be for the rungs that go left and right. But to make sure that they're all flat, I take them to my 32-inch disc sander, and I'm flattening them across. So this way I have a flat, non-bandsawed surface to be able to join to. And that's why I'm taking them here. It's important that those are all nice and flat so I can make a nice kiss glue joint right at those spots. And I'm working on my welding table to keep everything nice and flat. I need to fill this in with the cross members, or the stretchers, or whatever we want to call them. So I need to cut some raw material. These surfaces are now flat, so I could make sure that they fit in there. Whatever I cut is going to be nice and smooth between those 2 surfaces. I'm not going to lie, it was painful to have to cut a piece of material off of that log every single time I needed to. I'll do it one more time before the end of the video for the seat. Every time I cut into that log, I just hope I'm doing the right thing. When you have such a beautiful piece of material, it is intimidating. You don't even want to touch it for any reason. Now I'm giving myself a lot of room to sculpt. 4 of these are going to go across the long lower part, and I only need 2 that'll get cut into 4 pieces for the top. Now I'm laying it on there, and I'm just getting my pencil line, and I'm going right to the chop saw, and I'm doing my best. Sometimes the curve or the angle was a little compounded, and I had to compensate for it, but it was only just a skim of the miter saw blade by lifting it up or whatever it might be. And none of those angles were anything that I could record. I had to move the miter saw until the line was lined up. There was nothing that was consistent. And now I'm clamping them together so I could move them to the other side so I could put marks for my domino joiner. And I'm just marking them so I know what goes where. And I'm using the largest dominoes I could use with this particular domino joiner. It's the first generation domino joiner. And I do a stack of 2 dominoes at every joint, which seems fair enough. And I stack them so that there's a less likelihood that I will cut into them when I'm going at them with the Arbortech. And I'm just using just your garden variety wood glue in there. And I put a lot of it. At this stage, I'm so far from where it's going to end up. And I still don't know where it's going to end up. You guys get to see the finish on the thumbnail, and you can see that it was successful, and I'm very happy with the net result. But right here while I'm working, I'm just thinking, oh boy, I hope I'm doing the right thing. I hope I didn't waste this log. Putting lots and lots of glue. I would have liked to have done more of a Maloof style joint, but to be perfectly honest, in this circumstance for me, this was the easy way out. I knew I was going to have a pretty good glue joint, but it's important that those surfaces that mate are kissing cleanly. And I hardly had to do any fill once the whole project was done. Those joints really kissed really nicely. Now this is my second set of legs, so I do 2 and then a set of 2, and then I'll join those by getting those stretchers. Now here you see the entire time the setup on the weld table hasn't changed. So this way I can make sure every pair of legs that falls on the weld table will always be the same distance apart. That gives me some symmetry. And now I'm using just some random bits of cardboard to get my negative space in there. I could tape it, I can have my angles, and as long as I know where they're going to attach to the bump outs or the knuckles, I know that I can get what I need. And now here I just go at it, follow my lines, and from an editing point of view, I'll tell you a little secret. That was the first time I cut. I just used the same cut a few times. I go in there, and now I'm doing the top one the same way, just using some random bits of cardboard to get my angles. And it's important that I mark where on that 4-inch piece it goes. Same thing, this is the first one I cut. Don't tell anybody. But in the sequence of the edit, it looks like I'm doing it again. But I only shot the first cuts and just used them each time. And there's my brass hammer, which is still available. There'll be a link in the description if you wanted to buy one of those. And there you go. And now it's really important that I get this locked together nice and tightly so I can pick it up, put all my marks for the domino, and it's really the first time I'm seeing this thing in 3D. And I have to make sure I mark everything appropriately so I don't lose where each piece goes. Now I haven't even really thought about the top yet. I know I'm going to have to cut a lot of material off. And now here I'm just going bananas with the domino joiner, getting all my joints in all the right spaces, and then just preparing it. This right around here is where I started to feel good that everything was going together cleanly. I thought I was going to have a much more difficult time matching all these surfaces and all these various angles. But here you can see everything's going together nice. And when I do a messy glue up, I always just use a 1/4-inch sheet of plywood underneath me. I've made it to this critical point where the frame is glued up. I now have some ideas for what the seat's going to look like, but the first thing I need to do before I begin sculpting it is I'm going to level out the top. I didn't give much concern or thought to what this was going to look like until it was glued together. Now that it's glued together, I'm going to use a level. Make sure my table's level first. Come up here and find that critical level line around the top of the seat, and then I'm going to sculpt right to that line. Now I did a couple of pencil sketches. If you follow me on Patreon, you'll see the couple of the pencil sketches I showed off. So I had a little bit of a guideline, and now I'm transferring those lines to the stool itself, and I'm using Arbortex, a few of the different Arbortex tools to sculpt. And once I got one side done, I felt good about it. I still need to sculpt all the inside edges as well, but here you could see I begin to start to remove a lot of the fat. And I'm working on that top. That's all heavy end grain. I could have also gone at it with a sharp handsaw and just probably flattened all that. And now I'm just breaking down some of those interior parts with some chisels. And this is, for me, this is really fun, just sculpting and just having a free form time. I'm not very good when it comes to making things perfectly square and straight. This for me is really more my comfort zone. It's just sculpting and just really just letting loose and not being overly concerned, and knowing and developing the confidence over time that any chip or accident can be dealt with and then be incorporated into the final design. I mean, that's a real fear factor for a lot of people, is what if I chip out something? What if I break something? You can always glue your chip back in, which I've done. You break something off too much and you say, oh, that really shouldn't have gone that far. Let me glue that back and start again. I've certainly been there. Now, as I dug into the inside part of the leg rungs here, I honestly thought that I didn't have enough material. And now, once it's all said and done, maybe I didn't cut off enough. So you just never know. Now here, I got the sculpt pretty good, but with this Arbortex sanding pad. And I'm not using the proper Arbortex pads. I'm just using regular 5.5-inch sanding discs, which, to be honest, because of all these curvy shapes as I got into the corners, that bit of the sanding disc that's not backed really rolled right up into those corners. And I worked on this into the night, and now I'm working on it with a palm sander right there. And that was my final. And then I still had a lot more to go. I did some rasping and a little bit of hand planing, which I cut out of the video for time. And then here I'm filling a crack with Total Boat CA glue and sawdust out of the palm sander. And it makes a quick, fast paste. You could also have used the 4-minute epoxy from Total Boat. And I'm just working that in. Now the bottom of the seat, I want it to be perfectly flat. How would you get that perfectly flat when you have a big giant stool like this? And I wanted to, so when you pick the stool up, I wanted it to feel nice and sexy inside with your fingers. So now here I'm cutting it again for the third time. And I'm cutting off what's going to become the seat bottom. Earlier in the video I said that this was 15 inches wide. It's actually 13 inches wide, but I need it to be 15 inches wide. And here I cut some fat off of the thickness of the seat, and by me adding this piece on here, that gives me what I need for the seat. It's about 14 and a half inches. And now I need to joint those sides so that I can glue them together cleanly. I just do a face glue up. I don't do any domino joints or anything. And now this is the beginning of what's going to become the seat topper. I tried my best not to use any sapwood or anything like that so that that joint would be as invisible as possible. And I'm going at it here, just centering it on there. I have a little bit of an idea. It's going to be sort of pillowed sides. And now you can see I'm just doing a real shallow curve. I'm using my elbow as my fulcrum, or my center point of my compass. And I'm just sculpting it. I just can't go past that marker line that is the perimeter of the top of the stool itself. But everything else is fair game. I'm trying to work my way down to a nice, long, gradual curve from the bottom of the seat up to the top. And with the bandsaw blade, I'm really able to get at it. This is a pure joy working on this bandsaw with this brand new blade. And now here I'm going at it with the sanding discs. I actually was able to get enough with the bandsaw blade that I just went right to the sanding disc. But this is just the edge. Then I got to flip it over and work on the top. And again, with the turbo planer from Arbortech, I just kept hitting up the inside, hitting up the inside. Now this is going to be in the Double H Boots showroom. They're going to use it as a guitar stool. Apparently lots of musicians stop by this showroom and they want a place for people to be a featured spot for them to sit and play. And I thought it would be comfortable if someone's going to be sitting on here to have the bottom of this seat scooped out. And then I have to address some branding. So here I smooth everything out. I scallop the seat from the outside edges to the middle of the seat. It goes down about 1/2 inch. I went away for a few hours. I came back and I'm really digging it. As soon as I walked in the room, it feels right. I'm going to do a logo treatment right here. I'm going to laser etch the logo for the Phantom Rider Series boots. The more I look at it, the more I like it. It has a very primitive feel to me, and I'm actually really digging it. I got enough material here. If I mess up the logo, I could sand it out, try again. But if I get it right on the first shot, I'm going to live with it. All right, let's go laser etch the top. When I opened up the logo, I really opted for just the skull itself. The skull is the icon of the logo, and I didn't think it needed the words because it's going to be in the setting where the branding is going to be pretty prominent. I'm really happy. This is my first try. I etched it fairly deep, thinking I was going to fill it up with Total Boat resin with a sparkle in black, but after looking at it and the texture at the bottom of the laser etch looked really good to me. Now, since I bandsawed that apart from the original stock, if you remember a few cells ago, the bottom had a big bandsaw texture on it, and I wanted to get rid of the bandsaw texture, so I take it over to the big disc sander and I get rid of it. I could have also done that on the jointer. Now here I am, I'm sanding away all of the burn from the laser etching, and I went a little deep thinking I was going to fill it back with resin, but I didn't ultimately do that, and I really like it. It's got a real beautiful deep texture to it. Going at everything with Total Boat Gleam. I give everything 2 coats with Total Boat Gleam, which is the high gloss stuff, and then I go at it with Total Boat Satin. So 2 full coats, sanding in between of the gloss, and then another sanding, and then a coat of satin. The gloss looks pretty, but personally I like satin finish on all of my varnished projects. The gloss sometimes is a little too much. Now here I am sanding it the next day, giving it its second coat of gleam. Total Boat recommends that you build up with the gloss and then your last coat should be satin. And as their recommendation, and that's what I'm doing. Now I'm sanding everything with a 320 sanding pad. I take 2 320 sanding pads and I spray glue them face to face. And now everything's got paint on it. And I'm drilling the seat to the stool itself. I'm using Robertson screws, 3-inch Robertson screws. Robertson is my favorite screw. If you follow me on Instagram and Patreon, you know I talk about it a lot. Now I drill out, but to avoid breaking the screw, you'll notice I screw it in, pull it out, screw it in, pull it out, screw it in, pull it out. Each time going a little bit deeper than before. I don't want to run the risk of breaking it off into the material. And I put my logo on there with the burnisher. And here we are done. 3 coats of paint. I'm very happy with the net result here. That's right where I worked. I did the whole carving outside so as not to fill my shop with sawdust. A big shout out to Double H Boots and their Phantom Rider series. Go check them out. I've been wearing them this whole time. I love them. Here I am sitting on the stool. I'm being careful because I don't want to ship it with a scratch, so I'm being super careful. And here you can see my Double H. I like these boots. They're great for the farm, going into the chicken coop. And this is one I'm very proud of. And will I make another one like this? Maybe. This was a lot of work. This is very reminiscent of my rocking chair. I'll put the link in the description for the rocking chair video that I made several years ago. Sam Maloof inspired rocking chair. Thank you very much. I appreciate you guys watching all this time. And check me out on Patreon for some behind the scenes stuff. Thank you all very much. Love and respect.